So now we want to bring in Rikki Klieman to talk a little bit about what Nancy Cordes brought up. Rikki Klieman, our legal analyst. All right, Rikki. So here's the thing. We know that the FBI spoke to only one of Judge Kavanaugh's accusers, right? Spoke to Deborah Ramirez. Didn't speak to Blasey Ford. The argument could be she testified extensively. We know her story inside out and backwards, right? So Deborah Ramirez, we've learned now from the White House that the FBI reached out to 10 people, interviewed 9. But Deborah Ramirez says none of the people on her list, and she gave a pretty extensive list of people who could corroborate her story, none of those people were interviewed. So, you know, what do we make of this investigation? You would think if it was limited to only Blasey Ford's accusations, then they wouldn't talk to Deborah Ramirez. But obviously they reached out to her, but then it appears as if didn't attempt to corroborate her story. What gives?
Well, I don't know what gives ultimately beyond the specific instructions that the FBI may have been given by the White House. It makes absolutely no sense if you are going to attempt to corroborate the allegations of Dr. Ford, that of course you're going to those witnesses that she named, who we already know said they had no memory of this particular party. And by the way, they should have no memory of that particular party because nothing traumatic happened to them. If I had to think about the parties I was at when I was 15, I couldn't possibly give you a clue where they were or when they were.
And no memory is different than it didn't happen, which is the assertion of some Republican. In fact, Judge Kavanaugh testified that Leland, one of the witnesses, said that, you know, it never happened, but that's not what our understanding is of what she said.
Correct. So then we have Deborah Ramirez. Deborah Ramirez's cause has never been brought forth into some place like the Senate Judiciary Committee, and her corroborating witnesses, should they corroborate her in fact, have never been interviewed, so we don't know what is there to know if she's telling the truth. And then we have Michael Avenatti's client,
Julie Swetnick.
Julie Swetnick has given probably the most explosive allegation, even though Brett Kavanaugh is not named as the wrongdoer, but he is allegedly present where a gang rape occurred. And that, as Brett Kavanaugh called it, that allegation was a farce. But nonetheless, her allegation is done under pains and penalties of perjury. So I know that the White House does not care for Michael Avenatti as a lawyer, and they have dismissed this as an Avenatti stunt. But if you're doing a thorough investigation, what would it have hurt to have talked to Julie Swetnick and to talk or not to any corroborating witnesses? So we're still left in a veil of really that is opaque, if not kind of see-through. We can't get there.
And we probably never will.
We probably never will unless there's an impeachment proceeding should he be confirmed.
Right. And it feels as if some of these arguments are political in nature, wrapped around legalities. For example, you've heard a lot of people, including the President of the United States, saying that, like, it appears that people are guilty until proven innocent, and that a man's reputation is being ruined because we've already convicted him in the court of public opinion. But let's remember where President Trump, when he was a candidate, felt about people who had been accused of crimes that actually didn't commit them in the case of the Central Park Five. He's framed this discussion as a legal one when it really isn't a legal one because we're never going to know what happened.
Fair enough. And I think that's really an erudite explanation, Vlad. The reality is this. You have a clash here of the new culture of Me Too, where the pendulum has swung in one direction, where since basically November, since Harvey Weinstein, the uncorroborated, unsubstantiated word of a female accuser, or perhaps a male accuser, but the uncorroborated word of an accuser has been believed by enough people that we have seen icons, titans, people who are substantial fall. Whether it was Harvey Weinstein, whether it was Matt Lauer, whether it was Les Moonves, whether it was people at CBS or any other network, that the reality of the situation is that was enough. So suddenly, it's not enough. And so it's a real clash of values here about the culture. Now, I agree with President Trump that you are innocent until proven guilty in a court of criminal law, but we're dealing with a political situation here. So if you are a senator who has a crisis of conscience, if you have the slightest belief, we're not talking about proof beyond a reasonable doubt, if you have the slightest belief that Brett Kavanaugh might have done any of these things, or that Brett Kavanaugh lied to you about his drinking in high school or college, which otherwise would be totally irrelevant. I mean, if anything, you would applaud someone who drank in high school and college and then created this grand life that Brett Kavanaugh has in public service. But if you are a person of conscience voting on this and you have the slightest itty-bitty doubt, should you confirm him while you have that doubt? Isn't that the question?
I feel like it is the question. Yeah. And look, Americans, people in this country and around the world love to drink. President Bush famously had a drinking problem when he was a younger man, did not stop him from becoming president of the United States. Other presidents have admitted to smoking marijuana when they were younger, didn't stop them from becoming president of the United States. So the question is just the one that you posed. The standards seem to have shifted a bit, certainly from the Democrats' perspective, in that they're now talking about lying about drinking, and people seem to be saying just because he had a couple of beers or just because he threw a nice
Two
ball.
points, though. You're right. That the people you mentioned all admitted to the problems or dabbling or whatever they did.
Well, Brett Kavanaugh admitted as to his drinking. I mean,
he did.
For heaven's sake, it created the Saturday Night Live skit.
That's true. That's true. But I think it's the way that he admitted to it, that it came off like, yeah, occasionally I drank too much. But there are people coming forward saying that it's not occasionally, that it was every weekend, and more than that. You can decide who you believe, right? And the other difference is, you know, when you talk about it was okay for people to become presidents with a background like that. That's because we, the people, said it's okay. We voted those people in. We believe their story. In this case, we're depending on senators to vet those stories, determine whether or not they're true, and make the decision for us.
Well,
it's entirely different
for you.
Yeah.
The president serves for a maximum of 8 years.
There you go. Yeah.
The United States Supreme Court justice has tenure for life.
Right.
And he or she has power over all kinds of issues, including, in this case, democratic issues that could come up. If you look at a case like Citizens United, I mean, you look at cases that are political, Democrat versus Republican, but also over women's rights. While saying all that, I think no one, and I say it where I am no matter what my Twitter feed is going to say after this, Brett Kavanaugh, before that hearing, he was eminently well qualified to get this position.
Right.
So what happened at that hearing, which I think, as exciting as it was to cover it and as historic as it was, also left you with a feeling that this is one of the lowest points that has ever happened before the Senate on both sides. If Dr. Ford, all she wanted was an FBI investigation and would never have had to have been exposed, we wouldn't have had to have put her through that public spectacle, and then we wouldn't have had to have put him through this public spectacle, and both their families would not be receiving death threats.
Yeah, very good points, Rikki.
Always great to have you. Rikki, thank you so much. We appreciate it.